Okay,
Yeah.
so we're going to go back. We're on the rise of the two-party system. Despite what President Washington recommended in his inaugural address, two things that resembled political parties appeared in American politics. Again, they centered around the two most influential men in America at the time, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Hamilton and his supporters, which came from the North, became known as Federalists, and Jefferson and his supporters that came from the South became known as Republicans. So we're going to tell you the difference between the two parties, starting with the Federalist Party. Tell you a little bit about the Federalist Party. Now, here's the key statement to the Federalists. They had very little faith in the ability of the average person to govern themselves. They had very little faith in the ability of the average person to govern themselves. They had very little faith in the ability of the average person to govern themselves. So, what type of people were they? What? Wealthy. Okay. The second thing about the Federalist Party of interest is that the party wanted to give power, obviously, to what type of people? Wealthy people. Okay, wealthy people. So the party wanted to give power to wealthy people. The third thing the Federalist Party wanted to do was to create a strong federal government under the control of the wealthy. Okay? This party wanted to create a strong federal government under the control of the wealthy. They wanted to create a strong federal government under the control of the wealthy. Now let me ask you a question, number 4. Would they be supporters or non-supporters of the Bank of the United States? Why would they be supporters? This is where they followed Alexander Hamilton. So they were supporters of the National Bank of the United States. Supporters of the National Bank of the United States. And number 5, where do you think most members of the Federalist Party lived in the 13 states? What areas? New England, very good. New England. And where else are most of the wealthy people? Along the what? Atlantic seaboard. Very good. So this party was strongest in New England and also along the Atlantic seaboard. That's where the Federalist Party was strongest. In New England and along the Atlantic seaboard. Similar to the colonial days, number 6, the Federalist Party included wealthy merchants, wealthy lawyers, wealthy manufacturers, and church leaders. So the Federalist Party included wealthy merchants, wealthy lawyers, wealthy manufacturers, and wealthy church leaders. So the Federalist Party included wealthy merchants, wealthy lawyers, wealthy manufacturers, and wealthy church leaders. Those were the types of people that were members of the Federalist Party. And number 7, according to the Federalist Party themselves, they represented, quote, the rich, the well-born, and the able. According to the Federalist Party themselves, they represented, quote, the rich, the well-born, and the able. The rich, the well-born, and the able. That pretty much sums up the Federalist Party and what they thought, their thoughts, members, etc. So now we'll tell you about the Republican Party and see if there's any similarities at all. So this is the Republican Party. Number 1, this party had great faith in what? The ability of the average person to run the government. The Republican Party had great faith in the ability of the average person to run the government. The Republican Party had great faith in the ability of the average person to run the government. Number two, the Republican Party favored limited federal government. They favored limited federal government. Limited federal government. That's number two. The Republican Party favored limited federal government. Which means number three, they favored strong state governments. Very good. They favored strong state governments. So number two, the Republican Party favored limited federal government. Therefore, number three, they favored strong state governments. Number four, the Republican Party favored guarantees of individual liberties. The party favored guarantees of individual liberties. What does that mean? They favored guarantees of individual liberties. What's one individual liberty that's on the books right now everybody's arguing about? The ability, the liberty to do what? Bear arms. Yeah, so those are individual liberties, okay? They loved individual liberties, the ability to do this, the ability to do that, the ability to bear arms, okay? Number five, the Republican Party wanted all people to have control of the government. They wanted all people, not just the wealthy. They wanted all people. They're being kind of kind. They didn't say that the wealthy shouldn't rule, did they? They said that all people should. But they had a little bit of agenda, because you've got to take in mind at this time that 90% of the population of the United States at this time were the average person. So they're saying, we think that all people should have control of the government, knowing that 90% of the people were in their money area, so to speak. And number six, this party was very much against what? That the Federalist Party was very much for? The Bank of the United States. Yeah. The Republican Party was very much against the National Bank of the United States.
Why would they be against it?
Because they saw it as a money power, rich people's game. Now they say by 1794, most voters in the United States had chosen the political party they preferred and supported. And ever since 1794, what have we had in this country? A two-party system. Okay, ever since 1794, a two-party system. Because they were supporting Alexander Hamilton and or Thomas Jefferson even before this. Okay? So, we're going to have our president, first really election since Washington's gone out of office. And this will be the election of 1796. Election of 1796, we're really going to have an election. The political parties. Not just going to pick our president, we're going to have an election. Now Washington got elected, but he was the only one running, so to speak, you know what I mean?
I thought he was just
Well, he just was picked. I mean, people could say, yeah, we elected Washington, because why? Everybody wanted it. There was no choice, okay? Now there's going to be choices. Now, this is kind of interesting how this first election went, because each party nominated someone for president, okay? The Federalists nominated John Adams for president. Federalists nominated John Adams for president. And they nominated Thomas Pinckney for vice president. So on the Federalist side of things, the man they nominated for president was John Adams. The man they nominated for vice president was Thomas Pinckney. Both men we've talked about. Who do the Republicans counter with? Who do they nominate? Thomas Jefferson for president and Aaron Burr for vice president. So the Republicans counter with Thomas Jefferson for president and Aaron Burr for vice president. Now, this is how elections went this time. I want you to think about this. In political elections in 1796, here's how it went. Whoever got the most votes of those four guys was what? President. whoever got the second most amount of votes among those four became vice president. A lot different, okay? So, I can keep that in mind. In these days of election, at this time, top vote getter would be named president of the United States, and the second vote getter would be vice president. Well, what was it expected? That you would either choose a Federalist, you'd either vote for both Federalist candidates or you'd vote for both Republican candidates. That's not the way it worked out. When the dust cleared, John Adams, the Federalist candidate, received the most votes and was elected the nation's second president. And Thomas Jefferson, the Republican candidate, received the second highest vote and then became vice president. So you have a president and a vice president from different parties and different philosophies, yeah.
What was the point of having
It's a good question, because it was assumed, and they didn't think about this, that you would vote one way or the other. The Federalists kind of thought, well, you know, everybody will vote, we're going to be in good shape here, and everybody will vote. I don't know what the idea behind it was, but it was assumed that people would vote party lines, and they didn't. So you have a United States, because, and answer your question, Pinckney could have been the president if he got the most votes, but people didn't think it was going to work that way. They thought it would fall in line, that whoever won the election, their partner would be the same.
So
Yeah.
did each person get 2 votes then? So they,
No,
right?
you only got to vote once.
Well, I know, but you pick 2 people, right?
Yeah. One.
So then,
So you don't vote for the vice, you don't vote for the, you only vote
so
for
then
one person.
really, if you think about it, of course,
Well, not unless enough people voted for the vice presidential candidate. You just don't know. It was a screwy deal.
So it's
I mean,
not
that's what was so
right. They
screwy
didn't
about
think
it.
that
And it's
through.
gonna, no, they did not think it through. That's the thing. Well,
Because if they're voting for their,
now listen,
Presidential.
after this election and this screw up, after this election, it became an unwritten law that you were to vote for only one party in presidential elections, because people were voting cross-party in this deal. Okay, so were there some people that weren't wealthy that voted for John Adams? Sure there were. Okay, so they kind of went through this mistake and decided, you know, we're gonna have an unwritten law that from now on, you have to vote just for one party, okay?
Wait, that doesn't make sense, because you said they only have 1 vote, so they would,
No, they could vote for did you say vote for president and vice president?
Yeah.
Yeah, they could do that.
okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I thought you said they got 1 vote at a time.
No, one
Yeah,
vote per
and then they
position.
go to right, one of
That's
the
what I
four.
thought too.
And
But
doesn't matter.
it still doesn't make a lot of sense, and this is our first election, and we're gonna learn from this first election, okay? All right, now, let's get away from politics and figure out that we're on the verge with war with France again. All of a sudden, we're on the verge of war with France, okay? So that's the next subtopic. We got a new president though, and who's the new president? John Adams. Okay, so on the verge of war with France. Now, do you think Adams was pretty thrilled to have Thomas Jefferson as his running mate? No, he was not very happy at all. But he didn't have a lot of time to worry about it, because by the time Adams took the oath of office, the United States was being threatened with a war from France. France didn't quite get over that little business we gave them before. You know what I'm saying? And so they're not very happy. So by the time Adams took the oath of office as president, the United States was being threatened with war from France. And the relations became very poor ever since when? We refused to do what? Yeah, no, not the revolution, but when we decided not to, well, yeah, we had the Treaty of 1778, we decided to bag that. Relations just got poorer and poorer and poorer. Now, also the French weren't very hot on Jay's Treaty. Why? What did they see it as?
It's like, we're not gonna help you.
Pro-British, okay? It was. So the French also resented Jay's Treaty. They saw it as pro-British. And they're pissed off. And they should be in a way, because after all, what did they do for us in the Revolutionary War?
Saved us.
Saved our bacon, right? Marquis de Lafayette, the French ships coming in to trap Cornwallis. So they're pretty resentful. They're mad about these things. So Adams is going to have to try to negotiate peace with France, or we're going to be at war. Okay, because they're mad. They've had time to think about this. They're mad about us not supporting them with the Treaty of 1778. They're equally mad thinking, what the hell, these guys aren't coming to our aid and we helped them in the Revolutionary War. But we were so afraid of getting into a war with Great Britain, we were willing to do what? Sacrifice a relationship with France. And now they're coming back. Well, that takes us to our next subtopic, which is the Xyz Affair. Oh, what'd you write? Let's see what Carly wrote. Go ahead. What'd you write? What? Okay, hey, French resented Jay's treaties, right. But the thing you should have under the subtopic is Adams doesn't have time to worry about having a Republican vice president. He's being threatened with war from France. Why? Because they're still mad about the Treaty of 1778, and they see the Jay's treaty is pro-British, and so they're about ready to go to war with us. Okay, and what's Adams want to do? Yeah?
Oh, you gotta go.
What are you talking about? For what?
Bye, guys.
You guys just hang tight a minute.
I can show you text.
From who?
EA.
He just now texted and said get down here?
No, this morning. Said 110.
I'll tell you what, somebody has got to start communicating with these teachers. What? What are you pointing at? Let's just wait and see. It's not 110. Let's see if they announce for it. Okay, I'll give me 5 minutes. Well, it's not. Okay, the XYZ Affair. The XYZ Affair. I see no one in these hallways going anywhere. Are you two the only ones playing? All
Yeah, they are.
right.
I'll say videotape.
That was an
You know, you kids are gonna learn to support me instead of these goofy guys. There's nobody.
You said you'd like this being a
Yeah, what would you say, Connie?
Hey, where are you going? All right, go ahead. Hey, good riddance, but good luck. All right. Okay, I forgot where I was at. Oh, what you need to have on that subtopic is basically those things. That President Adams now has to try to avoid war with France. We don't want to go to war with anybody right now. We're not prepared. Okay, the XYZ Affair. Early in 1797, President Adams sent 3 prominent American diplomats to France to try to reach an agreement with that country to avoid war. So,
Wait,
yes.
does this Adams have two E's?
No.
Does he have 2 what?
E's.
E's?
D's.
No. Come on here.
Why would I have D's?
Early in 1797, President Adams sent 3 prominent American diplomats to France to try to reach an agreement with that country. And when they got to France, they were met by 3 French diplomats that would only identify themselves as X, Y, and Z. They would not give their credentials or their names. So in 1797, to try to avoid war with France, President Adams sends 3 American diplomats to France. They meet with 3 French diplomats who would only identify themselves as X, Y, and Z. Now, when you negotiate, you negotiate. What's the difference between negotiation and ultimatum?
One is open negotiation.
Yeah, that's right. Ultimatum is you will do this or else. Okay? Well, when these French diplomats got with the American diplomats, they gave the American representatives 3 ultimatums. They weren't into negotiating anything. They gave ultimatums, 3 of them, strong ones, to the American diplomats to take back to President Washington or President Adams. ULT, shh, ULT, IMATUMS. Ultimatums. All right, here's the first ultimatum they were given. President Adams gave a speech to Congress earlier, before this trip, and he made what the French regarded as some negative comments about their country. And the first ultimatum was that President Adams would have to publicly apologize to the French for those negative remarks that he made during and addressed to Congress. Okay, so the United States had to publicly apologize for negative remarks made by President Adams that came from a speech that President Adams gave to Congress concerning the French. They were offended by it, and they said that President Adams have to give a public apology, yeah?
Back then, how did like the news like travel that fast? Like we couldn't turn on the TV and see that and stuff like that.
No, a lot of that stuff had to be corresponded overseas. The second ultimatum was that the United States would be forced to grant a loan to France. The United States would be forced to grant a loan to France. That was the second ultimatum. But I think it was the third one that really set us off. And the third ultimatum that these three French diplomats, X, Y, and Z, gave the American diplomats to take back home was the United States must pay a bribe of $250,000 to France. So when the American diplomats get over to France, French diplomats X, Y, and Z state, you must apologize publicly for negative remarks that President Adams made in a speech in front of Congress. You must loan us money, and you must pay us a bribe of $250,000. Well, you can imagine when these insulting demands reached back to the citizens of the United States, what did they want? They wanted to go to war. They said, let's get after it. We're not taking that. Well, because of that, the United States made 3 war preparations, did 3 things to prepare for war. So when this news got back to the United States, the biggest majority of Americans were ready to go to war. And so we made war preparations. And here's 3 examples of what the United States did to prepare for war. Number 1, we created the Department of the Navy, which was a byproduct of what? The Department of War. So we created the Department of the Navy outside, so to speak, the Department of War, or within the Department of War.